Caleb, how you doing, my man? You doing okay?
I'm great. How about you?
I am doing well. Caleb Maupin. Caleb Maupin, Center for Political Innovation. He's a speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst. He is an author. His last books, what is it, The Neo-Trotskyites?
Sure. Trotsky
Um,
and the neocons. Yeah.
Trump, Trotsky, and the Neocons. He also had a book just before that I think is relevant to what is taking place now, and that had to do with the assassination of the CEO for that drug company. What is the
Yeah.
name of that book, just so the
Well,
audience would
that's
know?
interesting. So I originally called the book The Killing of Brian Thompson and the Danger of an American Years of Lead. And then Amazon wouldn't let me publish it with that title. So it was just called The Danger of an American Years of Lead. And it's on Amazon under that name. And it's under the original name on lulu.com. But the Years of Lead has been something that a lot of people have been referring to. I wrote this book back in December as kind of my reaction to the media celebrating Luigi Mangione. And, I said that was leading to a dangerous, dangerous place. And I brought up the Years of Lead in Italy as this intelligence manipulation when you had all this crazy political violence in order to keep Italy in NATO and prevent the left and the right from coming together to leave NATO and the coalition government that Aldo Moro wanted to propose. And I talked about that. And now, since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, everybody's talking about Years of Lead. I mean, Max Blumenthal's talking about it, and Due Dissidence is talking about it. In our sphere, everyone's going, wow, Caleb was right about the Years of Lead. And, well, I tend to be right about a lot of things. So, I appreciate it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I love it. You nailed this one. You did nail it. I mean, and, it just, to piggyback what is taking place, Michigan Church, or not really church, it's Mormons, I guess, Book of Latter-day Saints, that gets attacked, 4 people killed. And you get, I'm trying to find the picture of the guy, basically a good old boy with a gun. This gentleman right here, I don't necessarily know his reasons. He was killed in the attack itself. He burned the church, apparently had IEDs in the car. This guy, he was a Marine. Don't know his motives yet. There was another gentleman, well, I call him a gentleman just for point of reference. This guy, he wanted to go and murder a pride parade as payback for Charlie Kirk. Apparently, the right wing tends to bring up left wing violence, missing the point that their rhetoric also incentivizes people to behave in particular ways. And of course, we had Charlie Kirk. And if I'm not mistaken, there was another one in Texas that just took place. Like, we get killings all the time, but these seem to be mass events where the entire point is to take a gun and go murder a lot of people for hashtag reasons. I think, and by the way, just one last point before I bring you in on this. Right here. This is what Donald Trump and his team recently put out, Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence. And, as we keep pointing out, Charlie Kirk, immediately after he was killed, somebody came up with the idea, we are going to use this as a 9/11 moment domestically, meaning we're going to use this as a political weapon and a political cudgel to go after our political opposition. And so they have now come up with executive orders. I know some people don't think the president has power, but executive order is a power to do something, where they're going after, quote unquote, Antifa, like, meaning they're taking action based on this stuff, sending military to various locations around the United States, particularly Democratic cities. This is being done on a fig leaf, like basically it's not real, and yet they're still using this and doing this. And I guess my sense is, especially if you're looking at social media, the argument that a lot of the people are making, especially on the right, don't seem to care about America. What they seem to care about is power. And so the thing is, yes, good job. Throw those people in prison. Good job. Go after the left. Go after the political opposition. And even to the point of January 6th. But let's get to that part first. Give me your take on that. Because it feels like the country is coming apart at the seams. And people who are screaming civil war and those type of things, it seems that that's driving, that's a narrative. But that narrative is not entirely without reality, in a sense of the killings and the shootings that are effectively taking place, many of which seem political in nature. Give me your thoughts.
Well, a couple things come to mind. One thing that I have pointed out is that Trump declaring Antifa to be domestic terrorist organization. There is no such designation under U.S. law for a domestic terrorist organization. There is the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, which was passed by Bill Clinton, which has the State Department list foreign terrorist organizations. And it makes it a serious crime if you're an American to support one. That hits them with very, very heavy sanctions. But there is no designation for a domestic terrorism operation organization, right? In Britain, they do have that designation. And we saw recently a whole bunch of people get arrested for holding up signs saying they supported a group called Palestine Action. And that's, if you support, Palestine Action, this group in Britain that I guess has engaged in, like they've gone into factories and places that are working with Israel and destroyed property or something because they've been declared to be a terrorist organization by the British government. It is illegal to hold up a sign that says, I support Palestine Action. Now, we don't have those kind of laws over here. So when Trump says he's declared them a domestic terrorist organization, like it's this like, bum, 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 look what I did. It has no legal meaning whatsoever. And everyone's kind of playing along and no one's pointing this out. I find it weird, both the left and the right. The left are like, oh my God, he declared them a terrorist organization. And the right is like, he got him. He declared them a terrorist organization. It has no legal meaning, right? I mean, he might as well declare them Santa Claus or declare them, the Easter Bunny, or I don't know. I mean, the Tooth Fairy. I mean, it just doesn't mean anything. It's like, it's just a word. It's just, and seeing everyone play along. And you would think that the opposition would at least make fun of that and be like, that doesn't mean anything, but they won't, right? It's like they're all just kind of going along with it. I find that to be odd. The other thing is like, so the Mormon church, the LDS church that was recently shot up, right? Horrendous shooting, targeting this church. I just want to point this out. So, I am very interested in religion and different topics. And, the Mormon church is a very, very important church in the history of the United States, right? I mean, the state of Utah was founded. A complicated history. Originally, they were against slavery. They were an anti-slavery religion, and, they believed in polygamy. And then they moved out to Utah, and then they became very racist against the Native Americans. And it's got a whole complicated history. They didn't really become part of the American political establishment until like the 1970s and 80s is really when they started really going into the CIA and the FBI, and suddenly they were like part of the establishment. They were kind of considered fringe, but if you go to Idaho or Utah or Portland or Washington State or Seattle, or Oregon, they're a big deal. And I mean, I didn't, if you go out to the West, right, it's kind of a big deal and big influence on the culture, and they play board games, and I mean, there's different things about them that have kind of seeped into the culture. Kind of like, how people can be culturally Jewish, but they did, they don't practice Judaism. But
religious, right?
Yeah. And it's like, if you go out to the West, it's a really big part of the culture in places like Arizona and New Mexico and all that. Just kind of an interesting thing. So I've read about these things over the years, and I noticed, I watched like one video on YouTube from this woman who is an ex-Mormon. She quit the Mormon church. She's mad at the Mormon church. I watched like one video. My YouTube channel, my YouTube feed fills up now with videos by this one woman. And she's got hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and she's very good looking. And it's every video is, I hate the Mormon church. They're a fraud. Joseph Smith was a con man. It's a big fraud. It's a con. And it's just this woman. And then the Wall Street Journal did a whole feature on her. The Mormon church is up against this, this YouTube channel that's exposing her. And she's got hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and she's got videos about everything you ever heard of about Mormonism and how it's bad. And she goes after the Twilight movies because they were written by a Mormon. Did you know that?
What?
Yeah, right. And it's just everything, and it's just hate basically. And I mean, this woman, I'm sure she has some trauma. I'm sure she's got justifiable, anger at, I'm sure there's corruption there, and there's, dishonesty and hypocrisy like there is in every religion. And I'm not here to defend Salt Lake City and say the Mormon church is infallible, but there's this internet culture where it's like she's become internet famous. She's making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, bashing the religion and the community that she grew up in, saying it's a fraud, it's a fake, it's, and then I see this shooting. Obviously she had nothing to do with this shooting, but it's like, that's this mindset that it's like everything is as a con, everything's a fraud, everything's a scam, and I'm going to expose and tear things down, and I'm going to preach resentment and hate kind of. I think about a couple different literary analogies. One of them, I think of, Moby Dick, right? The classic, novel. Right. Well, the plot of the novel is that there's this sea captain, Captain Ahab, who is a whaler. He hunts whales, and he was trying to kill this huge whale called Moby Dick, and he got, crippled, right, for life. And so he spends his whole life obsessing with finding the white whale, finding Moby Dick, right? And the whole thing is that's the tragedy, right? He could go, start a new business, go do something else, but he's so fixated on getting his revenge, right? It's like destroyed him, right? And then I see a lot of people on the internet that are like in white whale mode, right? They're fixated on destroying somebody or tearing somebody down, or, they're going to, and the internet really kind of cultivates people to get into a kind of a white whale mindset, right? Where there's not just fandom, they call anti-fandom, right? Fandom is when you become obsessed with somebody, and that can be unhealthy, right? We get all the beautiful women on the internet have stalkers who are obsessed with them and all of that. But anti-fandom is also dangerous, where it's like people find a celebrity or people find a religion or a political group or something they hate, and they just become obsessed with it. I'm going to destroy them. I'm going to, it's really, really unhealthy, right? And that's a huge part of the internet. And like this YouTube channel that's been widely advertised is a Mormon anti-fandom YouTube channel, basically, about how, the Mormon church is evil, the Mormon church is a fraud. And I feel like, this guy who shot up a community center or a church that associated with the Mormon church, it looks like he was somebody who had fallen into this mindset of anti-fandom. He was obsessively hating the Latter-day Saints. And look what happened. And then he turned into a murderer, right? And, and as much as he might have legitimate complaints about the religion, you don't have the right to go there and kill people. But if you fixate and you kind of collapse into this downward spiral of hatred, which the internet is so good at getting people to do, right? I see that. The other thing is there's an old episode of The Twilight Zone, right? Classic American television. You ever see The Twilight Zone?
Oh, I love it. I love it. Absolutely love it. Yeah.
One of the most famous episodes of The Twilight Zone is called To Serve Man. And I reference it a lot, right? And,
yes.
Yeah, what it's about is like these aliens.
My language, Caleb.
These aliens come to Earth, and they're really, really nice aliens, and they're giving everyone health care, and they cure cancer, and the human life expectancy doubles, and they're so amazing, and they just love the aliens, and they always ask the aliens, why do you do this? And they say, well, we have this book. It's called To Serve Man, and we just start following our book, To Serve Man. And so the people are like, great. And so they're going to start, taking them back to the home country, right? And so all these people are lined up, and they're getting on the spaceship to go back to the home country. But this woman has been translating their book, To Serve Man. And she runs, and as the people are getting on the spaceship, she stops them and she says, To serve man, it's a cookbook. It's a cookbook. Right. And that's how the episode ends. Right. And that the whole reason that they were being so nice and, curing cancer and all of that is because they want to eat people. They're cannibals. Right. Or they're going to eat people that just serve man. Right. It's a cookbook. And that's how our culture has really trained us to think everything's a cookbook. Right. If there's any community or any organization you might be part of, or any cause you might believe in, or any politician, it's a cookbook. It's a cookbook. Right. And that it's a way of like cultivating people to be not politically active, to not believe in things, to not have healthy relationships, and to just kind of be bitter and lonely on the internet, though. But then you get on the internet, right? And the internet is the one place where you're allowed to be. And it's like, it trains people to, it's hard. Think about dating. You're talking about dating and cheating and stuff like that. Being married, I'm married. I've been married for 11 years. It's hard. It's hard to be married. It's not easy, and it takes a commitment. You have to be committed to being married, right? It's hard to be in a political organization. It's hard to work with other people in any kind of sense. It's hard to start a business. It's hard to, and working with people is a difficult thing to do. And people let you down. People have their flaws. Things don't go as you would want, But if you cultivate people to just shout, it's a cookbook, and run away, right? Which is what the internet really kind of trains people to do. In every connection, right? Relationships, there's one of these rabbit holes. I watch one thing. I watched one video about what is narcissism. Suddenly my feed fills up with loads and loads of videos. My ex-boyfriend was a narcissist. There's this kind of narcissist. There's that kind of narcissist. You know how many people are sitting there seething on the internet? They had a breakup, or they got, divorced or whatever, and their ex was a narcissist, and they watch videos all day long about narcissism, and the narcissists are doing this and the narcissists are doing that. And it's like, that's how the internet is. It just gets you into this negative place. And the worse it gets, people get depressed, people get suicidal, people isolate, people don't have healthy relationships, or they become shooters. And I see, we can talk about the years of lead, and that's what my book is about, the years of lead and et cetera. But I see a lot of this violence as tied in with kind of this culture of anti-fandom, this culture of it's a cookbook, this downward spiral the internet gets people into. I mean, the incel thing, that's a classic thing, right? That's just a phase young men go through, right? When you're a young man, you can't get a girlfriend, you feel lonely, you feel like women don't like you. It's just kind of a normal part of being a young man and growing up. Maybe if you're like ultra good looking from the time you're 5, you don't go through that phase. But most boys at some point in their teenage years, they go through that phase. But then they get over it, and it's always been there in the culture, right? The Phantom of the Opera, he's an incel, right? The whole thing is he's deformed, he's disabled, so he goes around killing women and setting traps, and he's an incel, right? And if you watch the musical Oklahoma, right? Judd Fry, the villain, is an incel. He has a whole song about he can't get a girlfriend, and he wishes he had a woman, and then he goes and tries to kill the hero. So it's always been there. There's always been guys who feel rejected by women or whatever and have resentment. That's just part of the thing. But now with the internet, if a young teenage boy feels that way, he can join an internet community of people that reinforce it, right? And he can develop a whole worldview about like women and it becomes like a whole part of his identity. Whereas before it was just kind of the phase he went through and got over. That's what makes the internet dangerous. So those are kind of my initial reactions, but we can talk more politically about the years of lead. But I just want to talk about the internet culture and how toxic it can be. But that's all. Go ahead.
No, that's a good point. No, that's a very good point. It breeds cynicism.
Yeah.
I mean, on some level, right? But it breeds cynicism in a way where I think people mistaken political ideology for cynicism. Meaning cynicism is not political ideology. Me assuming that the worst is always going to take place is not an analysis. That's just me assuming the worst is going to take place. That's a broken clock, right? Mm-hmm. And even if it's true 50%, 80% of the time, that's still not political analysis. There's a difference in those things. But it's kind of driven by experience, environmental experience. And the internet, correct me if I'm wrong on this, if you disagree with this, is only reflecting that experience back at people in a way that allows them to build communities, even if the communities, as you point out, the incel thing. Well, okay, yes, it's a phase you go through in the 60s, but now it's a culture. And the culture comes together about how much we hate women because, they don't look at us, they look at the jocks. They don't want to deal with a good weirdo like me. They want to deal with these other people, and we're angry at women now, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you become a culture unto yourself. It's kind of strange, but it's just kind of the way the internet works and the way it brings people together in those ways. But isn't that stuff a reflection of the culture, just being reflected back at the public? It's almost like if you had a psychic society where people could read minds, but in a shallow way. Wouldn't that just be the internet? People put their thoughts out. People have Twitter, they have Facebook, they put a glossy image of themselves on Instagram. They associated various groups of people who are like-minded, who thinks very similar things to they do, to the positive or to the negative. Isn't that our society? It's just what it means to be a person in this particular society, and have that being pushed back at you over and over and over again to harden that particular point of view about this is what the world is. Mind you, you're choosing it on some level, but it's what the internet does. Give me a take on that, or do you disagree with that?
Well, I'll point this out. Is when I was a kid, my parents would often say to me, "Be positive, be positive," and I would be resentful of that. I'd say, "I can be however I want. If I'm feeling bad, I can be negative or whatever." Right. But there used to be a social obligation to keep a positive attitude for the sake of the other people, right? Because if you're around somebody who's feeling bad, you're likely to feel bad. Right. And that, your feelings, we human beings are collective in nature. Right. And the way we interact with people, it affects us. Right. The way people react to us is the way we judge ourselves, that everything human beings do is collective. And so there was this feeling that it was your obligation to be positive for the other people around you in your life. Right. And it's interesting, if the people around you are positive, it's easier for you to be positive. Yes. And if you are positive, it's easier for the people around you to be positive. And there was like this feeling that, like, for the sake of everybody, we're going to try to be positive. And there's something to that. And we've kind of gotten away from that, right? And the internet gives everyone permission and the ability to not be positive, but to be very, very negative, and to feed everyone else's negativity. that's kind of what I see going on here. Again, it's an element of, I don't think it's a big conspiracy. Like you said, it's that, this is just kind of the internet brings this out in people. But there's an element of like crass marketing in it, right? Is that, people have pent up emotions, people have negative feelings, and the internet is a place that they can vent them. The internet is, it's kind of like pornography, right? You can't be sexual all the time, right? But the internet, you're just there with your computer. You can be sexual all day long, right? And it's very similar to that, right? It's, the internet is a place where it's just you and your computer and the whole world, but not exactly. They're not in the room with you, right? And so all the negative emotions, negative thoughts that you might police when you're around other people in social interactions, you can just let them all out on the internet.
I see. I
see.
And I guess I'm trying to say, though, that society underlies that. Like, meaning, if you are having a difficult time financially, let's take the internet out for a moment. If you are, let's say in California, and you see 300,000 homeless people laying on the street, the government doesn't care.
Right.
How does it make you feel about your government or your society?
Yeah.
Or if you're seeing crime where people are raiding a store and stealing all of these things out of the store, homeless people living on the streets. Like, meaning, if you are looking at your world, and in your world, you're like, they don't care. I know they don't care. There's nothing in me that tells me that these people care. That gives you a take. And so it's like the take will come out to be brutal, but that brutality is not necessarily untethered to the real world. I'll give you another example. Doctors. I'm not a big fan of doctors. When I was in the same way that woman talks about the Mormon church on the internet, I've had horrible experiences with doctors that have given me a very brutal take on the way medicine is done, especially in the United States, and especially, let's say, to people of color. That's my take. That take is driven from experience. And I'm saying when those experiences come online, I'll give you another one, rap. Like, people used to be like, oh, this gangster rap and the horrible things they're saying. It's like these guys in the very beginning were living on the streets. They were selling drugs. They could see women prostituting. They have broken homes. They are reflecting their experiences. All of this stuff is coming from an environmental outcome. Like, if people were living in utopia, they wouldn't have an internet where you have Nazis and all of this other stuff on. And I'm using utopia as an extreme. But I'm trying to point out that isn't the internet just a reflection of the individual experiences that people are dealing with in their societal life being reflected into, I don't know, a condensed version online where you can get it very specific, whereas in life it's more diffuse.
Indeed, but it's not offering solutions, right? It's allowing people to just kind of stew in their negativity. And that's the issue. I mean, obviously, yes, that negativity wouldn't be there if there weren't things to actually complain about, right? But you don't want to get into that place of just complaining, right? Ultimately, the way you solve problems is by forming organizations, people coming together and putting forward solutions and demanding them. And that the internet very much has a culture where people don't do that, right? And that's kind of what inspired me to write the book about the American Years of Lead, right? Okay. Is that when Luigi Mangione allegedly, I mean, we don't know, and I have questions about his guilt, but when the killing of Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO, happened, immediately there were all these people all over the internet, all over social media, cheering him as a hero. For doing it and saying this was absolutely awesome. And I immediately thought of the Medicare for All marches and Force the Vote, and how when people were actually marching in the streets demanding Medicare for All, it was, oh, this is unacceptable. And, there was one Nazi who went to one rally and, oh, we can't do that. So that was unacceptable. And Jimmy Dore was pushing a parliamentary procedure around Nancy Pelosi. Oh, my God, how dare he and all this. And then the very same people that were just completely opposed to the Medicare for All marches and completely opposed to the Force the Vote proceedings, suddenly this guy just murdering somebody on the streets, that's amazing, that's awesome, and we should all just cheer for it. And I'm like, something's off here. Something's very, very off here. Why is a random act of murder or lone wolf killing acceptable, but a mass movement isn't? And I looked into this, and I've seen the internet culture of anti-fandom, and I've seen how the organizations that do emerge, get kind of torn apart. And, and I argued that this was an intelligence operation, and that this was basically a plan by the establishment to win by default, right? If there's all kinds of senseless political violence, the population gets weary and demoralized, and the status quo continues. And that's what happened in Italy in the 60s and 70s. There was a moment where the far right, or the right wing, the Christian Democrats, wanted to leave NATO. The Communist Party wanted to leave NATO. And the public was overwhelmingly opposed to NATO. And the CIA fomented Operation Gladio, which was funding fascist groups to kill communists, funding communist groups to kill fascists, and then communist groups to kill other communist groups, and fascist groups to kill other fascists. And it was being fomented by American intelligence, and the population wanted to leave NATO, but they were kind of overruled because there was just all this crazy political violence, and the population became weary, and as a result, Italy remained in NATO. And the kidnapping of Aldo Moro was kind of like the ultimate moment. So Aldo Moro was the leader of the Christian Democrat Party, and he wanted to form a coalition government with the Communist Party that would oppose NATO and would also focus on reindustrialization of Italy, like, economic protectionism, kind of to bring industries back and such. And he was in talks with the Communist Party. So then the Red Brigades, which were this like communist, like Maoist breakaway from the Communist Party, it was very violent. They kidnapped Aldo Moro. And they held him for a couple months, and then they killed him. And they left his body halfway between the Communist Party headquarters and the Christian Democrat Party headquarters to make a statement. It was later revealed, there was a journalist who revealed that top leaders in the Italian government knew where Aldo Moro, the head of the Christian Democratic Party, was being held and didn't rescue him. Because they were waiting for permission from somebody, and it was a pretty horrendous incident. But it was to send a message: you can't form a coalition government, and that there would have been a left-right alliance. The far left, the Communist Party, and the right wing, the Christian Democrats, wanted to form a coalition government to actually get something done, to leave NATO and to economically develop Italy, and that just wasn't going to be permitted. And the Years of Lead, Operation Gladio. Later, it was revealed that there was something called the P2 Masonic Lodge, which was, I guess, the CIA had set up this, and used Freemasonry and set up kind of a secret society of people that were going to keep Italy and NATO. And they recruited people from the far left and the far right and all kinds of groups to join this kind of secret society. And that the CIA had put like secret, weapons, depositories all across the country in case Italy was ever invaded by the Soviet Union or whatever, and that the Red Brigades and the fascist groups were actually using some of the guns and weapons the CIA had left in the country in these like secret, hiding places. And the whole thing was an operation, and it was a successful operation that kept Italy in NATO. And Jamaica is a similar story. In the 70s in Jamaica, they elected a guy named Michael Manley, who was a friend of Fidel Castro, and he wanted to move Jamaica towards socialism. And then there was all kinds of intense, crazy gang violence. There was a gang called Shower Posse. They were called the Shower Posse, and they supported the Labor Party, which was the party that was aligned with the United States, and the People's Party, or the Popular National People's Party, or something like that. They were the socialist group that was backing Michael Manley. They had gangs that were supporting them, and there was just intense, crazy gang violence. Bob Marley went down there and did his One Love concert and had the two party leaders kind of shake hands and, try to oppose political violence, but it didn't help. And there was just so much killing. And eventually Michael Manley left office, and they didn't move the country towards socialism. Jamaica didn't become an anti-imperialist country. And then later, this Shower Posse gang, the USA sent troops to Jamaica, or at least law enforcement, and there was like a big, shootout. And the leader of the Shower Posse gang is now in federal prison in the United States. And what's crazy is he was trained by the CIA. It's revealed they actually trained him and his whole group to go down to Jamaica to foment all the political violence. But he became such a big drug dealer and all of that in the early 2000s. The USA had to then go into Jamaica and take him out. And now he's sitting in a federal prison. It's really a crazy story. There was even a massacre in New Jersey. There was a Jamaican American Community Festival in New Jersey that happened. And the Shower Posse gang showed up, and there was a shootout, and people were killed in New Jersey. Like the political violence the U.S. government fomented in New Jersey spilled into the United States in the 1980s. I mean, it's a really crazy story. So you look at all of that. I mean, there's many other examples you can give, but this is how counterinsurgency is waged. And this is what I wrote about in the book, right? If you read, Frank Kitson, who was the top British intelligence officer, if you read William S. Lind, who was the Pentagon strategist, who, he was kind of the mind behind the surge in Iraq. He wrote the Handbook of Fourth Generation Warfare. The way you fight an insurgency is you make it confusing as hell. You make it so no one knows who's on what side. You make it so the insurgents are fighting other insurgents. They're not fighting the state. And that's how, and then the status quo just kind of wins by default. And that's the strategy that is used. And if you read, William S. Lynn's Handbook of Fourth Generation Warfare, I mean, William S. Lynn was a Pentagon strategist who engineered the surge in Iraq. He said, look, for 7,000 years, people have been telling the story of David and Goliath. Has anyone ever sympathized with Goliath in the story? No. And he said the reason that armies lose in insurgencies is because they're perceived as Goliath and the population is viewed as David. And so what you have to do in order to defeat an insurgency is you have to confuse the population so they don't see it as David and Goliath. Make it so there's 5 different Davids fighting each other and no one can tell who's who. And Goliath is just kind of standing back and saying, look, guys, we don't want any violence here. And people will run to Goliath for protection then as the Davids are shooting at each other and they don't know what's going on. That's the strategy that they tend to use in order to control insurgencies. And Frank Kitson wrote about this. He's the one who oversaw the British operations against the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. The Mau Mau Land and Freedom Army was fighting the British Empire in India. And the way that they controlled it is they set up what they called counter gangs. And it was people that were former Mau Mau fighters that were captured, and they were then turned into, fake Mau Mau fighters. And they would go into the countryside and they would commit atrocities that would be blamed on the Mau Mau. They would go and gather intelligence about who the Mau Mau were and all of that. And it got to the point that the Kenyan population couldn't tell who the real resistance fighters were and who these other people were. And on top of that, they started rounding up the men and putting them in like little prison camps that they set up, right? And the British, it was a really awful, the counterinsurgency in Kenya in the 1950s, it was a horrendous crime against humanity. There's a book called Imperial Reckoning that kind of goes over the history of it. But as a result of, this, counter gang manipulation of the insurgency and also just rounding up all the men in certain areas and putting them in like little concentration camps, the British were able to defeat the insurgency in Kenya that had widespread popular support. And then a few years later, Kenya became independent, but it was with a puppet, right? They were not really independent. It was somebody the British picked. They said, now you're independent, but they're part of the British Commonwealth, right? Right. That's the kind of the game that's played, right? And it's kind of an interesting history there. And that the term counter gangs was used, and that Frank Kitson developed that strategy of developing counter gangs, and he used it against the IRA in Northern Ireland. He realized that the IRA had the support of the population. So instead of having the British Army go out and fight the IRA, they had Protestant gangs fight the IRA. And the British government was giving guns and weapons to Protestant groups to fight the IRA, which tended to be supported by the Catholics. And then at that point, it's not the British Army, the mighty British Empire fighting the Irish people. No, it's an ethnic thing. And, why can't we all just get along, Protestants and Catholics? And then you have the Vatican sponsoring these peace marches. And then on top of that, drug dealers began targeting the IRA. And so as drug dealers are shooting the IRA with, getting promoted by the British government to do that, the IRA then has to join with other drug dealers to protect them. And suddenly the IRA is involved in organized crime, which organized crime is a messy, ugly thing, right? And the IRA is like, in order to basically get protection from one group of drug dealers, they have to allow drug dealers to go through the neighborhoods where they control it. And the IRA is suddenly involved in organized crime, and organized crime is a really messy, ugly business that has nothing to do with right and wrong and justice. It's just and so the IRA gets mixed up in organized crime, and the Protestant groups are carrying out their atrocities and killing people. Then there's breakaway groups from the IRA that form of IRA fighters who think the real IRA is sellout and phony, so they're killing IRA people, or they're carrying out bombings that are then blamed on the IRA. And it gets so confusing. In the 80s and 90s, everyone in Northern Ireland is just kind of tired of it. And ultimately, they signed the Good Friday Agreement. And now, Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. And everyone was just so tired of the killing and the violence, and no one knew what it was about. This is how you wage an effective counterinsurgency. And creating senseless political violence, that is a big part of it. And that's what I maintain. That's the psyop going on right now. The American people are tired of the wars. The American people are tired of our economy getting worse. The American people want their freedoms to be protected. And so rather than coming together and forming some kind of united government like Aldo Moro was trying to do in Italy that would actually advance that, instead, we have all this senseless political violence. So the status quo just kind of wins by default.
Wow. That's grim. That's extremely grim. I mean, because when you think about that, how do you get around that?
Well,
It's an
we have to
addictive
call
strategy.
it what it is. We have to call it what it is and say this is what they're trying to do. And we have to make a conscious decision not to promote political violence. And we have to put forward a program that actually will fix the country. That's what we've done with CPI. We have 4 points, 4 points: public ownership of our natural resources, a national bank, mobilize the public to start rebuilding the country, right? And have a mass jobs program to just rebuild America, new high-speed railway, et cetera, kind of like the Works Progress Administration of Roosevelt. And then on top of that, invest in our population, start providing healthcare and jobs. It's a 4-point plan, right? And you put forward solutions that people can see actually implemented, and you agitate and say, why don't we have these things? And you build a movement demanding these real solutions. This is one thing I'll point out, right? That 4-point plan we have, very simple 4-point plan, that is what you call a transitional program. And that if you look at serious revolutionary movements in history, they have a transitional program. They have certain things that they want to implement that only they can put forward, and they kind of mobilize people for those things that they want. But I've noticed that fraudulent organizations, the communist groups in America, none of them have a transitional program. They have what you call a minimum maximum program, right? Which is they have the maximum program, which is crazy shit that doesn't even make sense. I read it, it's like, their maximum program is, we're going to have a government that stands for the downtrodden. And what does that mean? That doesn't even mean anything. I mean, one of these socialist groups, I was looking at their manifesto. I thought after the revolution, they're going to have a magic wand. And they're just going to go around, bing, they're going to make things disappear. We will abolish landlordism. Bing, what does that mean? How are you going to abolish landlordism? Are you going to nationalize all apartment buildings? Are you going to kick everyone out? Are people going to de facto own the building?
Yeah.
Explain what that means. They're going to abolish racism. What does that mean? How do you abolish, they're just going to go around, bing, bing, everything's just going to so they have a crazy maximum program. It doesn't even make any sense, right? It's just, it's like this super revolutionary thing. And then it's mixed in with the minimum program, which is just whatever the Democrats are already doing, like stuff that's already in the Joe Biden, Kamala Harris platform. Yeah. And what that is if a group is doing that, if they have a minimum maximum program, what that is they're just recruiting a group of fanatics to work for Joe Biden. That's what they're doing, right? And the maximum program stuff is there to give you the feeling that you're radical, that you're fighting the system. You're really just working for the minimum program. You're really just foot soldiers of Joe Biden. That's what's going on. But a transitional program, that's a serious thing. If you put forward, hey, we could do this, why are we not doing this? Like we have put forward the Bering Sea Bridge, the Peace Bridge over the Bering Sea. Why is it that with us being right so close to the Russian Far East where all this economic growth is going on, why don't we build a bridge connecting Alaska to Russia, right? And why don't we build the Peace Bridge so that America can get in on the economic development that's happening in Asia right now? That's a transitional program. That's something that could really happen. But it's not happening because our leaders are too tied in with Wall Street and the imperialists. So we're going around demanding something that could actually happen. And people are getting involved and people are saying, well, why are we not doing this? Oh, it's because our government's controlled by the rich and powerful. It's because of imperialism. That's how real revolutionaries tend to organize, is they have a transitional program. So that's how we fight against the years of lead. You need to put forward a transitional program. We need to reject political violence.
But you firmly believe that that's what's taking place now. Wait, do you believe that the CIA is involved in getting people killed? Or do you believe that environmental circumstances are pushing people into this kind of...
I believe that there is a conscious effort going on to get people demoralized and get people sectarian. And I think that what Operation Gladio was in Italy is now happening in America. I believe that. It looks to me like that is the case, because when mainstream media outlets are celebrating the murder of a CEO, right? Yet, a peaceful movement for demanding healthcare is viewed as, an unforgivable crime. Something's off. And that makes me think that, again, this is how the establishment in America wants to win by default, is by having the opposition from every side be confused and fighting itself and violent. And also, you have to be real. Trauma, right? Trauma is a very effective mechanism for preventing people from working together. I know a lot of old communists who are really heroic people who've made a lot of great sacrifices. but they have Trump derangement syndrome. And where does that Trump derangement syndrome come from? It comes from the fact that they were marching against the Vietnam War and they were protesting in the 80s, and people with American flags and people with crosses and conservatives got into fistfights with them and injured them. And, you know, when there's a body count, when people can recall, you know, friends of theirs being killed and all of that, it's very hard to then talk to people about, okay, well, we need to have unity. It's very hard because there's trauma there, right? When there's a body count, when people have been killed and all of that, you know, I think about someone I was very, very close to during the 2012 election, an older man who was kind of a mentor to me, who I learned so much from. But on the 2012 election night, you know, Mitt Romney lost, Obama won. I was on the phone with him, and I remember he was saying, how could all these people vote for Mitt Romney? And I remember saying, well, I mean, they voted for Obama too, and look what Obama did to Libya. As far as I was concerned, voting for Obama and voting for Mitt Romney were both wrong. But in his mind, people voting for Mitt Romney was just this unforgivable crime. And this just anger came out in his voice. Everyone who voted for Mitt Romney, these people have a hole in their head. Someone should just kill them. It just, you know, the anger coming up. But that was the anger of, look, I mean, he was a white guy who grew up in the South, in South Carolina, when Jim Crow was a reality, and his family, their identity was, we are not racist. We are against segregation. And his identity was very much caught up with, I'm not like those conservative evil people. I'm a good white person, right? And you know, the trauma and the violence and I mean the history there, for him, the idea that anyone might vote for Mitt Romney for any reason other than they're a bad person, he just wasn't going to hear it, right? And for him, voting for Obama was just 1,000 times better, even if Obama did a lot of bad things. You know, he had this kind of this trauma had been created that was going to prevent him from seeing things clearly, right? And that you know, in Latin America, I don't think Latin America, I mean, Venezuela is a great country and they're moving towards socialism, Nicaragua, but a lot of Latin America is kind of trapped because the nationalist military right wing of Latin America that the USA used to support, the USA has kind of pulled the you know, the carpet from under them, no longer supports them. And the actual anti-imperialists, the actual like Marxists and all that, they will never work together, because they've killed each other. There's been wars in which hundreds of thousands of people have died. People have been kidnapped. People have been tortured. They're never going to work together. And the way Latin America needs to move forward is the nationalist right wing, the WACL people, the World Anti-Communist League, and the legit anti-imperialists need to come together. They're not going to, because they've killed each other, because there's a body count, because there were death squads, because there were insurgencies, they were kidnapping. They're never going to work together. And, you know, for a while, it looked like Bolivarianism was on the march, but then as the USA pivoted away from supporting the right wing, the classical nationalist right wing of Latin America, and pivoted instead to supporting this kind of new left, right? They kind of fomented a George Soros new left in Latin America. At that point, you know, that was the maneuver that needed to happen. And the USA, I think Latin America, it's going to take a generation or so for that trauma to go away, right? But ultimately, the forces in Latin America that want the countries to become wealthier and not dominated by imperialism, on the one hand, you have the military right wing, and on the other hand, you have the actual communists, and they're never going to work together. There's a river of blood that's been drawn between them, and the USA is supporting this kind of phony liberal left that they created with George Soros that maintains the status quo. And that's part of this years of lead stuff too. I believe that not only was the killing of Charlie Kirk, you know, something that was obviously very, very traumatizing, but the way then all these people on social media were celebrating it, and the way that was just pounded into the heads of all these conservative people. Look, one of you got killed in this brutal, horrendous way, a horrendous video, and now there's all these people celebrating it. They want to kill you. They want to kill your family. They want to kill your relatives. They're coming for you. And of course, are they ever going to work with any leftist person then? Of course not, right? They're thinking of all these people that were cheering as someone they admired got killed, and they're traumatized by that, right?
Yeah.
And, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. No, please finish. Please finish.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, that's an operation, is this trauma, right? Getting people to believe they're in danger, that their lives are in danger, getting people to believe other people just want to kill them. You know, that is a way of controlling people, and making sure they won't form the alliances that might come down the road, right? And that's, you know, I had so many people who came to me after the killing of Charlie Kirk, and they said, well, it's okay for me to celebrate it, Caleb, because Charlie Kirk is an actual fascist and you're not. And I said, you know, I've been canceled by the far left, and they can't tell the difference between me and Charlie Kirk, even though I've been doing, you know, anti-racist and civil rights and demonstrations my whole life against war, and you know, and all of that. I got canceled by the far left, and it just became common knowledge that I'm a white supremacist and that I'm a neo-Nazi and I'm all these awful things. I'm not, you know, but and that there's all kinds of people all over the internet that couldn't tell the difference between me and Charlie Kirk. And I was like, I'm telling you, this is very, very dangerous, right? And the way that the left, you know, I mean, and I said, you shouldn't be celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk because you shouldn't be killing people for their political views. He was wrong about a lot of things. And there's very little that I agree with him on, but I was sickened by the people celebrating it. And that when you do that, when you celebrate it, you're sending a message to all the people who liked him that I am your enemy. I want to harm you, and that if down the road you start to agree with me on an issue, we shouldn't work together because I'm somebody that wants to hurt you. That's basically what you're saying, you know, and that, you know, you shouldn't, that's just not a good message to put out there. It's a very negative, hateful message, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I agree with your overall wants. I just want to point that out there. I want to make that very strong. Your overall wants, I agree with. I think people are responding to environmental circumstances. And when the left, for example, when Charlie Kirk was killed, agreed. There were some people that actually was out celebrating his death. Agreed. But the issue that I saw more than anything else, and maybe this is my disposition in the world, you know, sitting on the moon looking at events through a straw, was that the right immediately seemed almost gleeful that Kirk was dead and started to immediately make this political case that he's some kind of saint. He's with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. He's a civil rights figure. You get Trump and all of these other people basically at the memorial service, meaning they tried to fashion him into something that he obviously wasn't, which by definition is going to create political opposition. Like, it's one thing if you say, oh my God, I can't believe they killed Charlie Kirk. Okay, fair enough. Then to turn around and immediately say, Charlie Kirk was a civil rights icon. We should have a day named after Charlie Kirk. There should be a monument after Charlie Kirk. There should be this and that. All of that's political. All of it is political. And the moment that you create death and make that death a political event, then you will get chaos. You don't need anybody else to push that. Just the very act of you trying to say that somebody who half the country, or at the very least half the people that know him, consider him flagrantly racist, and saying this is a civil rights icon, it's offensive on its face. Showing a picture of Charlie Kirk shaking hands with Malcolm X is grotesque.
Well, and that's the
certainly
thing.
People are going to say something.
Say what you're saying, because immediately, the second you say what you say, immediately somebody flashes an image in their head of somebody celebrating the murder, and they think you're one of those people then, because you're just saying what you said right there. And that's not what you're saying. You're not celebrating the murder. You're just saying, look, you shouldn't be equating this guy with you know, civil rights activists and all of that, because he was just a conservative guy who went to college campuses. But they create this kind of like dual thinking where then you can't speak clearly about things. You know what I'm saying? Right. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? I'm sure there are people watching this right now that heard you say what you said, which I agree with. He wasn't a civil rights icon. He was just a conservative campus guy. Right. But they heard you saying that, and they immediately flashed in their head that image of somebody dancing around and celebrating it. And now they think you're the enemy. Right. And that's what trauma does. Right. And that you can't have a rational conversation. It suddenly becomes you're with our team or you're with their team. Right. And you're not on either team. You're just saying, like, let's be real. Charlie Kirk was a Republican college activist. Right.
Yeah.
And the trauma then creates a moment where people can't hear you say that. Right. And that's why trauma is dangerous. Right. Is that we can't speak clearly about things. Right.
It also goes beyond that, though. Again, I agree with your wants, but there needs to be honest political reflection about who you're dealing with. Meaning there are some, like, for example, to give you a perfect example. Do you remember when Sanders was running in the Democratic primary?
Yes.
And up to that point, when third wave Democrats were effectively, you know, Bill Clintons of the world and all these people, they would say the left is united. Yes, we don't have your entire political wants from the standpoint of the real left, but we do have some of them. And so you're close to us politically than Republicans. So you should vote for us because we are together as a political party. Now, that's the argument that they would effectively make to the left, giving the soothing point of view that we are working together. Okay, the moment that Sanders gets into a pole position where all of the energy is effectively with him, what do? That flips on a dime. And it becomes, the reality of it becomes clear. We're not on the same team. We're not pushing for the same things. Yes, we gave you an argument to make you think we are together while you were in the laggard position to keep you, soothing argument. But the moment that you became in somewhat of a pole position, we're in a rules-based order world, and we need to do everything in our power to put a knife in you. And look at what the U.S. does, right? The U.S. goes around the globe. You can say in the 70s and the 80s and the 60s, hey, we believe in freedom and democracy. We believe in free trade. We believe in all of these things. The moment that they lose, let's say, capability to China, where China's a threat, this is a rules-based order. This is not international law. We don't really believe in this stuff. We believed in this stuff when you were in a laggard's position. I'm saying the same thing is true in our current political environment. I strongly believe and will make the argument that we're not all playing on the same team. We're not all playing on the same sides. If I look at an event that takes place, I will be honest about that event, whether I think that event's cut left or right. When they were going after Trump, I would say, this is nonsense. Hush money payment to a porn star is insane. By the same token, when Donald Trump tried to overthrow the government, I would say Donald Trump should be put in a cage. I don't like either side. So I don't necessarily have an overt bias in this stuff. I just try to be honest about, as I tell my audience all the time, to their chagrin, sometimes my job is to just be honest. Not everybody does that. You may have some conservatives who would look at the world and say, well, obviously Donald Trump can't stay in a third term, or obviously Donald Trump lost the race, but not all of them do that. Not all of them believe in the same ideals. And because all of them don't believe in the same ideas, what you get is some people just believe in power. It's not about right or wrong. It's not about us working together. It's about you losing and us taking power. And if that means we can be king for 20 years, then damn it, we can be king for 20 years. I'm saying that you have people in your society that firmly believe that, are not in this mindset that you're in about, let's be kumbaya.
Well,
or tell me if you think I'm wrong.
Well, it's the issue of false polarization versus the polarization that we actually need. The false polarization is woke versus MAGA. It's, it's red team versus blue team. And in that false polarization, yeah, we should vote for Kamala Harris because she's closer to Bernie Sanders, and, and the Trump people are just the main threat. And that false polarization leads people to vote for what they don't want. Because we're on this side, and so but we need a real polarization around demanding defense of our freedoms, demanding an end to these wars, and demanding economic justice and building up the country. And if we could really polarize around those issues, that would be some left-right unity that would break the false polarization, right? And that wouldn't be, well, we have to vote for Kamala because she's different. It would be an actual real polarization where, I could see, forces that are opposed to the U.S. establishment and the way it's bankrupting and impoverishing the country and taking us into wars and taking away our freedom, coming together on that basis, right? That could be a real polarization, real opposition. And it would face a real solid opposition from the establishment, you can be sure. But it would polarize the country against the establishment. That's what's needed. Yeah.
Agreed. Like I said, I agree with you once. And I agree with the ends that you're trying to accomplish. My bias is to kind of, we should be working together for this better world. I don't know, man, but I've been disillusioned by some of this stuff. Like just seeing some of the comments that people make after, I've been disillusioned with the stuff. I was far more kumbayash when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And after watching US policy, it gives you a point of view of the world. It's a more honest, realist. Okay, not everybody believes the same thing that you do. Not everybody is going to be honest about political situations. People will lie based on their biases. People will make shit up to get from point A to point B. It's not about, a democratic order. It's not about putting America first. It's about how do we win? And that is a dangerous place to be in. So, Caleb, I agree with you. Don't, please finish. Last comment. Last word.
Oh, no. Hey, if people want to check out my work, my organization, Center for Political Innovation, cpiusa.org. We're doing great stuff. We're got a National Day of Action coming up October 4th to support more peace talks with Russia. And we're doing great stuff. So, and you're doing great stuff as well, Jamarl. It's always a pleasure to be on your channel. So thank you for inviting me on.
And it is always a pleasure to have you, man. And like I say, I learn from you every time you come on. I swear to God, your breadth of knowledge is just fantastic. I think I tell the audience every time that I'm always impressed
Thank you.
by your breadth of knowledge on this stuff. So definitely check out Caleb's books. Definitely check out Center for Political Innovation. Again, I want to nail down, I love you once, and Lord knows I agree with you in regards to, look, real polarization is a good thing. That I can accept, right? Like if I feel like, okay, we're fighting for something, that I get. But maybe you're right. Maybe this is just chaos for the sake of chaos, just for people to fall down to their camps and saying, okay, nothing can be done. This is just the way it is. Nothing is real. Everything is fake. All of these people are actors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So,
All right.
Caleb, you are fantastic.
Thank you.
Continue to be fantastic. Thank you, man.
Will do.
Have a good day, okay?
You too.
Be safe. All right. Caleb Maupin, always love Caleb. Caleb is a fantastic guest. He really is. Like I said, his breadth of knowledge is just